Hey everyone, welcome and welcome back. And oh, Spunk is making an appearance again in this video. He's with me, helping me through this one, which is going to be a doozy. So, to start, as I always say, I only speak for myself in these videos. I don't speak for all DV, IPV, abuse survivors or victims, those of any kind of violent crime. I only speak for myself, from my experiences, my interactions with other victims and survivors, my research, so on and so forth, right? So if you have questions or thoughts or things you want to ask a specific individual, please take the time to go ask that individual and go talk to them about their individual experience, because that's not for me. I only speak for myself. Thank you. Okay. The other part, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Liking says that there's value in these videos, so others can see that there's value, there might be value for them. Sharing, obviously, getting the message out, raising the awareness, which is the entire point of this channel. I get absolutely nothing out of this in terms of any kind of like financial kickbacks or anything like that. It's literally all about raising the awareness so that we can save lives and turn victims into survivors, and then help survivors kind of learn how to drop out of survival mode and go into living their lives, and which is actually something that I'm still trying to learn. Subscribing gives you updates on when I post videos. It also helps with the algorithm for other people who might be looking for this kind of content. And then commenting, just let me know what you want to see or questions you may have. I do respond. And then also share your own experiences. You know, I know I'm not alone here. I learned this after I got out. So I know I'm not alone, and we need to start really talking about this, because all of this DV, IPV abuse literally thrives in silence. So I'm not going to be silent. I really ask and implore you to not be silent based on your comfort level. So this video is going to be really hard. Now I am working on going in the direction of more positivity and the beauty of survival and what that means, and you know, I'm going to be working towards things that helped me, right? But I also find it absolutely critically important to outline and to bring to light how broken the system is, because I am immensely lucky. I have a wonderful job where I have a lot of flexibility. I work incredibly hard, but you know, I've really never had to struggle financially, really as an adult. You know, I have a lot of resources. My background as an investigator has really supported me in this entire process. My mother worked in the legal field for like 30-40 years, so she had all that background, and just I'm very lucky to be in the position I'm in, and this is how difficult it is for me. So a big part of the reason why I have this channel is like, how hard is it for everybody else to try to get out, right? So I do think it's critically important to bring to light just how messed up all of this is, because if we're gonna change it, the breaks have to be known, right? You can't fix something if you don't know it's broken. So this video, I'm going to read a statement. This is a very hard statement that I wrote, and it was very hard to write it. I never actually got to read it in court, and I will tell you why. This was yet another victim impact statement. I call them survivor impact statements because I was lucky enough to survive. I'm already talking fast because like I'm very stressed right now, but so I wore a high collar so you can't see my blotchiness that's inevitably going to come out. But I wrote this statement because this was in preparation for the first sentencing hearing after the plea was offered and accepted by my abuser, and it was not even effing close to what he deserved. But again, like I said in other videos, as a victim, you don't really have control. You might have influence, but you have no control. And so I kind of just had to just go, oh, okay, like I guess that's what we're doing, right? So as part of my victims' rights, under the Victims' Rights Act in the state I was in, I'm given the opportunity to speak at sentencing, right? And some other hearings, but sentencing mainly. Well, in preparation for the sentencing hearing, I wrote this statement. Now, at the time, I'm learning all of this in real time, and at that time, I didn't realize that like you didn't have a lot of time to talk as a victim. You get like kind of a sound bit, and the court just kind of goes, "Oh, okay, you're done," right? But you do get this opportunity. So this statement is rather long, but it has a lot of information that I wanted to share with the court, and I wanted to be on record. I never got to that because within, I think it was like honestly a minute, I don't even know, maybe it was like 3 minutes, I have no idea, of the hearing started, the judge actually rejected the plea. And the reason why is because the defense attorney at the time tried to do like an Alford plea where he's basically like, well, my client says he's innocent, but he's going to accept the plea just to like move on with his life. Well, the judge was like, well, if your client's innocent, I'm not going to sentence an innocent man, and he'll have a chance to prove it at trial, and rejected. Now, it went on to have a unopposed motion to accept the plea as written. And during that hearing, I talked to the judge and I said it was inappropriate and I didn't agree. And this was a different judge who said, well, I'm not going to accept a plea that the victim is not comfortable with, and rejected it again. So this was a second plea rejection after an unopposed motion to push it through. And at that point, it was up charged to a felony. Fast forward, in the end, the DA dismissed the charge after 18 months of fighting for justice, and I got zero justice because there's been zero accountability for everything. So I'm going to read that statement because this is literally, like, this isn't even everything, but this kind of was what I could give, trying to respect the court's time, but still give a very clear picture of what was happening. So I'm going to read it now. This is really, really, really hard. I had to go through, I had to remove names, remove locations, because if his family can sue me, if his dad and him can sue me for whatever, they absolutely will, if for nothing else, to make my life miserable. So I have to protect myself, I have to protect my children, and so I have to remove anything identifiable. So I have already been through this statement once, and now I'm going to read it. But I think it's so important that I'm going to do it. So this was what I had planned on reading, but I never got the chance to. Okay. And it says, "Thank you, Your Honor, and the ladies and gentlemen of the court. I want to start by expressing my gratitude for this time, your time, to speak when my voice has been silenced for so long. To speak on 10 years of cyclical abuse could take a lifetime, so I will do my best to summarize what I believe to be the most salient points. With this in mind, I ask for the court's patience as I read through this statement containing much-needed clarifications for Blank County Court and all its authorities, the people of the state of Blank, and for all abuse victims and survivors who have been, who are, and who will be. The undeniable and provable lies uttered and manipulations doled out by Mr. Narcissistic Abuser for countless years leading up to August 1st, 2022, and thereafter are so numerous that I was initially at a loss for how to get the truth out. As stated, in the interest of time and the needs of the court, I wanted to take this opportunity to give examples of the behaviors that always have been and continue to be exhibited by Mr. Abuser. Please note these behaviors do not just apply to me, my children, or any other significant other that has been and likely will be in Mr. Abuser's life. They very much extend to his friends, his family, and his community, whether they choose to accept the facts or not. To all of those generally mentioned in that list, blind support is enablement, not love. If I may repeat myself so that fact is fully heard and has a greater chance of acknowledgement, blind support is enablement, not love. I implore you to seek the truth because what you are told by Mr. Abuser is just a fresh coat of paint on a house covered in black mold, and what is said about you when you are not around is the floored over crumbled foundation of your relationship. Please note the following corrections to the record. When Mr. Abuser claimed to the court that he saved my life on the evening of September 10th, 2021, when I attempted to take my own life, an event which he has weaponized repeatedly to smear me in an attempt to paint himself a victim and me an unfit mother, he does not tell you the part about him standing over top of me in front of my children, screaming at me to, quote, just effing do it already. Take more and do everyone a favor, end quote. Censored only out of respect for the court. When Mr. Abuser boasts about his hobby garden, the small town farm he claims to have built himself, he does not tell you or anyone else within the community that the land upon which the vegetables are grown, the house within which the vegetables are cleaned and stored, the truck with which the materials for infrastructure and growth, as well as the transport of the vegetables to and from the farmer's market every Saturday, and all supporting costs were all wholly purchased by me. That he leveraged me as slave labor to continue fronting the costs for his dream, constantly demanding more even when I was in and out of the hospital getting treatment for ailing health. That when I asked if he would be willing to secure employment so I may take the risk of short-term disability, that he stated he would not, and the only acceptable solution was to quit my job to become his farming apprentice. That he grows the vegetables with misappropriated water in an area of this state so over-appropriated that water rights to us were directly denied upon approval of the well permit with no wait list for the foreseeable future. That mere water laws do not and would never stop him from living his dream at the expense of the community and the environment. When Mr. Abuser states to the masses that he loves his son more than anything in the world, he does not tell you that on August 24th, 2022, this county's Department of Human Services Child Protection Team declared that child abuse and neglect allegations originally filed against me based on Mr. Abuser's lies were unfounded and were further, quote, founded as domestic violence creating an injurious environment, end quote, based on, quote, a preponderance of the evidence indicating that Mr. Narcissistic Abuser was the person responsible for the child abuse neglect. He does not tell you that he would stand over top 2 children, including the child he claims to love, to intimidate them while he threatened that failure to comply with his demands would result in harm coming to those people and pets with whom and for which they both were deeply connected and loved endlessly, respectively. He would not dare tell you that he disclosed to me in our kitchen that when either of my children, especially the child he claims to love who is diagnosed autistic, is misbehaving, that he feels tempted and urged to cut them with a knife just to watch them bleed. He does not tell you that the only reason an investigation of child sexual abuse against him related to said loved son did not proceed is because he refused to interview with the Criminal Investigation Unit investigator with this county's sheriff's office. When Mr. Abuser claims that he was a victim of domestic violence, he does not tell you about the time he sat on top of me and repeatedly hit me before smothering me with a pillow, or about the time he grabbed me by the back of my neck and slammed my face into the solid wood floor because I was home too late after going dancing with a friend, the results of which were bruises I had to explain at work the following days until they healed. Or the time he choked me in the frame of the backsliding door until my daughter screamed, "Stop, you're going to kill my mom." Or the time he punched me in the face and told me, quote, that was a warning shot, before pinning me between an awning pole and a pool fence, asking me if I would like to, quote, go swimming, as he pushed me towards the water of our backyard pool by my face and neck so hard that it took 2 months for my bruises to heal. He also does not tell you, and actually adamantly denies under oath, about his admission to a mental health facility the next day, wherein he disclosed both suicidal and homicidal ideation. He does not tell you that he pled guilty to a domestic violence charge in July 2020, or that I fled our home only 2 days after his jail release for the exact same behavior. He does not tell you that his actions of August 1st, 2022 actually qualify as a federal criminal offense under the Violence Against Women Act. But perhaps this is one he just does not know. When Mr. Abuser claims accountability for hitting me because he allegedly feared for his life in my unarmed murder attempt, he does not say that he repeatedly beat me unconscious and continued to punch me and kick me while I was on the ground, or that when I was walking away, he sucker punched me from behind in the back of the head with so much force that I was knocked completely unconscious, unable to be awakened until emergency responders arrived. A memory of my own, mind you, that I did not recover for over 4 months because it took more than that for my brain to recover from the concussion he had caused on the night of August 1st, 2022. Behavioral science is just that, a science. It is not behavioral best guess. It is this science that enables this state's Domestic Violence Offender Management Board and other similar governing bodies to be able to write such volumes as the standards and guidelines for the assessment, evaluation, treatment, and behavioral monitoring of domestic violence offenders, and administer with accuracy such assessments as the Domestic Violence Risk and Needs Assessment Instrument. As an investigator for over 10 years, an evaluation I completed in order to see with as much objectivity as possible the reality of my relationship with Mr. Abuser. An evaluation that once completed showed that Mr. Abuser checked every single box for every single form of abuse, a behavior that continued even after August 1st, 2022, to include, but certainly not limited to, 1. Now, mind you, this is older. This was before there were more violations and more things that happened. So this was a few months beforehand, and then it continued even after this. 1. 6 protection order violations, which were verified by 2 sworn police officers to the extent that long forms were filed in my home state by the blank police department. 2. A bond violation in December 2022, wherein Mr. Abuser left this state without a motion filed with the court requesting permission, and therefore with no permission possible from the court to travel to my home state where I reside with my 2 children, all of whom are survivors of Mr. Abuser's abuse. And mind you, that was a very clear bond violation and nothing happened. 3. Multiple bond violations, to the best of my knowledge, related to repeatedly missed random urinalysis screens over multiple months. 4. Repeatedly lying under oath during the November 9, 2022 domestic relations hearing heard by Magistrate Blank, during which Mr. Abuser waived his Fifth Amendment rights to testify to his distorted recollection of events from the night of August 1st, 2022. These statements repeatedly and directly contradicted Mr. Abuser's own statements made over time in various forms to differing individuals and or entities, a practice very commonly and effectively used by Mr. Abuser to disclose the small amount of information required without disclosing the full truth, which may hinder his manipulation efforts. 5. Filing motion after motion with exhibits Mr. Abuser affirmed to be true and accurate, knowing that the statements contained therein were and still are verifiably false. 6. Fully committing to a contempt of court when Mr. Abuser quite literally yelled at a female magistrate during a hearing on or about September 16, 2022, because her scheduling of the following hearing was not on an acceptable timeline for Mr. Abuser. That's right, he literally yelled at a female magistrate in the middle of open court because she wasn't scheduling the way he wanted her to schedule. Even today, I want to believe that I am wrong about Mr. Abuser and his abilities to change for the better. Nobody wants that more than me as I work to protect my children and myself in a less than perfect system that often seems to support perpetrators more than victims or survivors. All while hoping that he does not do this to another. I want to believe that somehow Mr. Abuser has seen the truth of what he has done to so many for decades, even beyond my children and me, but his lack of accountability cannot continue to be denied. There are so many times I have convinced myself that this time would be different, that his tears and empty apologies and commitments to do better would actually come through. Born an eternal optimist, I still wanted to be wrong and managed to convince myself I just may be, a practice I nearly perfected after a decade of abuse, when I read the excerpts of Mr. Abuser's domestic violence evaluations performed by a professional evaluator. I realized I was not wrong when an excerpt of the final evaluation stated, quote, "Given Mr. Abuser's current presentation and assessment testing, he appears to be at high risk for recurring violent behavior, particularly in intimate relationships. This risk is further exacerbated by Mr. Abuser's limited accountability and if substance use concerns are not addressed." End quote. Further still, I realized just how wrong I was in my denial of what I know to be true as I read further that his final DVRNA interpretation could only be made after, quote, "DVI scales, domains, were truth corrected to ensure their accuracy," end quote, because even then, Mr. Abuser was not honest. I still wanted to be wrong when I was read what could be given of the final probation investigation report. I asked by an incredible advocate if I was in a place to review the report. I had convinced myself once again that this time would be different. That this would be the time Mr. Abuser finally took some true accountability. Any accountability. Any at all. I was wrong again, but not in the way I had hoped. As she read the statements made by Mr. Abuser, my stomach sank that still to this day his broken accountability stopped at, "I hit her," with a quick minimization that it was self-defense. I beg to see anyone of sound mind who would agree that punching an unarmed, beaten individual in the back of the head as they walk away can be defined as self-defense. The lies about his history and his family dynamics in an attempt to downplay the deep-seated psychological disturbances he harbors, a behavior explicitly outlined by a PsyD licensed psychologist in the summary of Mr. Abuser's psychological evaluations, wherein it states individuals with his profile and scores, quote, attempt to downplay any distressing emotions and to deny troublesome relationships with others, especially in their family or personal life, end quote. When he stated he was taking a guilty plea in order to just move on with his life, I was reminded of the same evaluation summary statement that, quote, his responses suggest feelings of anger, mistrust, and as one who is generally self-indulgent. Truth. He seems to have some disregard for authority figures, tends to deny responsibility, and blames others for his problems. End quote. Statements which cannot be truer, as evidenced by his extensive history of criminal behavior, non-compliance with court orders, overt disrespect to the court process and authorities of the court, and leveraging court proceedings to continue his abuse. As if there could not be more, this is all compounded by Mr. Abuser hurling insult after insult at professionals and subject matter experts that I had somehow managed to mislead well, being the primary to sole caregiver of 2 children, working an exceedingly demanding job as a security professional for a global organization, healing from my injuries and illnesses exacerbated by my injuries, navigating criminal charges I only faced as a result of Mr. Abuser's actions, gathering and preparing evidence in all forms to ensure he did not continue to get away with what he had done to me and my children, navigating a divorce wherein I was constantly defending myself against false accusations, and continuing to pay for Mr. Abuser's existence, rebuilding a life from clothes and tote bins for me, my children, and our pets, while being financially drained by insurmountable legal fees and medical expenses directly related to the beating I sustained at the hands of Mr. Abuser. Quite the feat for any one person, especially when you consider the list of professionals and experts that were, as alluded to by Mr. Abuser, able to be so easily persuaded or outright lied on my behalf. This list includes, but is certainly not limited to, 1. The only adult witness to the events of that evening. 2. Mr. Abuser's own son. 3. Law enforcement in both this county and the county of my home state. 4. Child Protective Services, which would actually include Department of Child Safety in a different state later on. 5. My criminal attorney and now a presiding judge, which I was forced to retain as a result of his actions. 6. The District Attorney's Office, including Mr. DA number 1, Mr. DA Investigator, Mr. Prosecutor number 1, and Ms. Victim's Advocate. 7. Magistrate blank during her time presiding over the domestic relations matter. 8. Judge blank during her time presiding over the domestic relations matter. 9. The licensed psychologist who administered psychological evaluations to both of us. 10. The licensed professional counselor who administered the domestic violence, mental health, and substance abuse assessments to both of us. 11. All of my physicians and specialists. This one's hard. 11. All of my physicians and specialists who have been treating my injuries caused by Mr. Abuser, including a concussion, submitted and fully endorsed as a serious bodily injury, a deviated nasal septum, damage to both of my eyes, which significantly increases my risk of retinal tearing and detachment for the rest of my life, a damaged jaw joint and 3 dislodged molars, which will carry the risk of nerve death for the rest of my life, a damaged wrist, a damaged hip, whiplash consistent with that of a high-speed vehicle collision, a twisted and tilted pelvis, compressed discs and nerves in my neck, compressed discs and nerves in my lower back, and a wholly misaligned spine. All of which can be proven were not there before Mr. Abuser mercilessly beat me on the night of my 34th birthday. 12, and the list goes on. The sentiment of denial and justification for his actions cannot be lost in his statement during his probation investigation, wherein Mr. Abuser states he is, quote, super stoked about life, end quote. As his actions ripple through me, diagnosed with PTSD, actually CPTSD, my children, both diagnosed with PTSD, my family, my friends, the community, and all others involved in this process, Mr. Abuser continues living his dream in a life built on lies, manipulation, and abuse. Any statements to the contrary are nothing other than outright falsehoods or delusions of grandeur, consistent with his psychological evaluation Axis 2 classification of narcissistic personality disorder. While I am at the point of never being surprised by Mr. Abuser's lies and manipulations for self-preservation and self-elevation at the seemingly limitless expense of others, I find myself continuously flabbergasted by his lack of acknowledgement of what he has done and continues to do. This, too, supported by the same psychological evaluation wherein the licensed psychologist states, quote, Mr. Abuser may see himself as having been unjustly blamed for others' problems and feels he is getting a raw deal out of life, end quote. What more evidence is needed than Mr. Abuser's statement during the probation investigation that he has been dealt an injustice, literally an injustice, throughout the legal proceedings, and that he was and is the true victim. Please allow me to be quite clear and direct in my final words of this statement. The only injustice Mr. Abuser has ever been a party to is that which he imposes upon others for his gain. Mr. Abuser only ever a victim to his own narcissism, greed, and his repulsive actions he chooses as a result. End of statement. So, I will say, because a lot of people will probably think, wow, is that like really true and like, is that exaggerated? No, it's not exaggerated. That is really true. And here's the really crazy thing. I can prove it all. I have evidence of it all. It's all documented. This is not made up. This is all literally documented in paper, black and white. Multiple agencies, 2 different states. This is all documented. This is all real. So, again, I read this not to bring discomfort to anyone necessarily. I bring this to the table. I read something that is very, very difficult for me to read, that honestly scares the shit out of me to read and post on YouTube. I bring this to the table because this is the reality of the system. This is why victims don't become survivors, and this is why I'm here. This is why we're here. We're here to bring this awareness to the forefront and say, you know what? We're not going to stand for this anymore. So I implore you, please like, share, subscribe, comment, raise the awareness, have the conversations with people, ask the questions, do the dirty work. Whatever you feel you need to do and whatever is within your capacity to do, please stand with me against abuse. Stand with me against the injustice that true victims and true survivors face every single day, not only in this country, but all around the world. And in doing so, let's save some lives together. Thank you so much.